So Mickey Cohen was born Meyer Harris Cohen on September 4th, 1913 in Brooklyn.
Oh.
Not born in Boyle Heights.
Oh,
and
wow.
bridged the gap between childhood and hoodlum. His parents, Max and Fanny, were Jewish immigrants from Kiev, Ukraine, which at the time was still Russia. And by the time this comes out, might again be because time is a flat latka. His parents spoke little English, but he had 5 older siblings who were all given an education by his dad when he wasn't at work at his fish market.
Okay.
So his dad is a fishmonger.
Fish.
Just a smelly fishmonger.
Fish
Greg,
vendor.
from Kiev.
Giving his kids an education on fishing and the fishing industry, and he'd read Moby Dick to them.
Yeah, that was their first book.
Yeah. Chowder sounds pretty good.
It was the Golden Band books, but it was Moby Dick, and it's 700 pages.
700 pages. Very little illustration, sadly.
So sadly, this whole setup with his dad came crashing down when his dad died of TB before Mickey was even 2 years old. So now the homeschooling was over, and so was kind of regular schooling too, because now the whole family had to go to work so that they could have food on the table. So by age 3, Mickey himself was a newsie whose job was to sit on the stacks of newspapers so that they wouldn't blow away.
Pretty good job. It's a pretty good job.
Hey, if it's union, I'll take it. I mean, that's basically what I do now. But
the papers blow away.
And you know what? I can't profess that I'm good at my job, but I do work there. I sit on all the newspapers. I sit on all of the tweets that the LA Times shoots out every morning.
And they still get past me.
From there, he graduated to stealing said newspapers and trading them for candy and hot dogs.
Not a dumb person.
No, anything to make a hot dog.
I got to put hot dogs on the table. When I say table, I mean my stomach.
My family can't live off of the old gray lady, week-old copies of the New York Times.
Imagine coming into the family home and everyone's like huddled over like a thing of beans and they're so hungry. And he comes in with mustard in his mouth like, nah, I'm good.
I ate at work.
No, I ate at work.
So his older brothers opened up a drug store. And once Prohibition hit, when Mickey was 7, they taught the little 7-year-old how to make bathtub gin in the back of the pharmacy they ran.
He'd wash himself in it.
Kill 2 birds with 1 stone, which is something Mickey did later in life. In other words, it was a perfect New York City childhood. But then when he was 9, it sounded like his mom also got TB.
Oof.
So the family moved to the only place where you can be cured of TB, Boyle Heights, Los Angeles.
Right.
Here, his mom opened up a grocery shop and later a restaurant where she could spread her TB freely while the kids did whatever the hell they wanted. His mom loved all her kids and she tried to keep a religious and loving household, but they were just so poor and she just didn't have the time to be there for them and also provide for them at work.
Right.
So she wasn't really around. And Mickey never really resented his mom, but he was mostly raised by his older sister, Pauline, who did her best, but she was a child trying to raise a slightly younger child.
Yeah.
And little Mickey did not feel good about any of this. His mom was so busy and her not being around made him feel rejected and unwanted. And he also felt inferior to his siblings because he didn't get the education they all got from his dad.
Right.
So he went to Cornwall Elementary School, which is now Sheridan Street Elementary. But it seems he was in a class for kids with special needs because he didn't know how to read and he hated it. Like he hated school.
I would hate reading if I also didn't know how to read. Like that sounds
It's the worst thing for you to try to do if you don't know how to read.
I love pictures. I hate words. That makes sense.
The irony that he surrounded himself with the printed word on the street corner. Around this time when he was about 9 years old, mind you, he decided to rob the box office of the Columbia Theater in Boyle Heights with a baseball bat. And for this, ended up doing 2 stints at a reform school on Fortmore Hill where the teachers would beat him with a bicycle tire.
Wow. With the whole tire or like the tube?
Spokes on and the bike's still attached.
Yeah, the bike is still attached to it. They lift an entire bike.
Well, it was a unit. It was one of those old timey like giant wheel, little wheel.
You misbehave again. I'm gonna hit you with the big wheel.
We can either do this the little wheel way or the big wheel way. Then when he got back to his regular school, he broke his leg, so he was kind of separated from the rest of his class. So he again felt unwanted and rejected by school, understandably so. So at age 10, he just stopped going to school.
Right.
That was it. That was the end of his education. Instead, he just spent his time wandering the streets of Boyle Heights as an illiterate 10-year-old.
Wow.
He got back into his old career of selling newspapers, this time for the Record, the Express, and the Examiner, both downtown at 7th and Broadway and in Boyle Heights on the corner of Soto and Brooklyn, which is now Cesar Chavez, right by the Breed Street Shul. There's a McDonald's there that I use the bathroom of. And Mickey Cohen would always use that bathroom.
Canonically, he would use the bathroom.
He'd go in with a newspaper and say, "Can I have a 6-piece chicken McNuggets?" And that's where that famous phrase came from. Take the McNuggets, leave the cannolis. He was more of a savory guy.
Take the bathrooms, leave the nuggets.
He also started running a dice game in the alley behind the newspaper building, but he was also in a Big Brother program, and his big brother was a guy named Abe Roth, who was a boxing referee and got Mickey into boxing.
Right.
So he started doing street boxing on the corners of Boyle Heights, sometimes making as much as $20 a fight. One time he even tried to bite his opponent's ear off in a fight in a move way ahead of its time.
Innovator.
That's what Mike Tyson said. That's what he whispered into Evander Holyfield's soon-to-be not ear. This one's from Mickey.
He whispered it into his ear, then he got up and walked 10 feet and told Evander.
But LA was a town of small ears, and he wanted to go bite ears in the big time.
Oh, I'm going to the big ear. That's what it's called in New York.
The city of big ears, Cleveland, Ohio. So he went to Cleveland, Ohio, because his brother Harry was a fight promoter out there.
Oh, wow.
So in the late 20s, at age 15, he decided to move there and give his boxing career a shot. His first professional bout was April 8th, 1930, which he won and then proceeded to lose his next 5.
Jeez.
But that doesn't really matter because most of the fights were fixed, and he was making money to supplement his day job as a soda jerk in a drugstore, which knowing him, he must have loved.
That must have been the worst soda fountain in all of Ohio.
I'm going to make you a phosphate you can't refuse.
It's good.
Any other mafia quotes you have that are ice cream related?
Can't think of any.
He was only 5'5", but he earned himself the boxing nickname that must have been a funny joke at the time, Gangster Mickey Cohen.
Can you imagine?
This little shrimp?
And then that shrimp went on to bite my ear off.
He fought in 19 fights total, with his last one versus Baby Arizmendi from Mexico, who was kind of famous in 1933. He had gotten more into boxing because the Depression was in full force, and jobs he was qualified for, which were few to begin with, were even more scarce during the Depression. So while he was boxing to make some extra cash, he turned more and more to gambling, and that was when he came into contact with a man that either ruined or saved his life, Lou Rothkopf. Lou was an associate of the legendary bootlegger Mo Dalitz, and this was Mickey's first contact with the mob, unquote, which doesn't exist. But for the sake of this story, to make it more understandable to, the marks out there that are listening, the mob.
Yeah, but keep in mind, we're actually just talking about waste management.
Yeah, it's a union.
Yes.
What do you want?
Ask Jimmy Hoffa. He knows it's a union.
With the appeal of being paid to, I don't know why I wrote this, with the appeal of being paid to do hurt people, Mickey...
Did Mickey Cohen write this?
No, those were pictures. If it was Mickey Cohen did it, it would be drawings he colored in with Evander Holyfield's grandfather's ear. Mickey accepted an offer that he may or may not have been able to accept from Lou and got folded into what was called the Hill Mob. They were mostly Italian, so he got the catchy new nickname of the Jew Boy.
There's a ring to it.
This is another reason why I have so much affinity. I'm like, oh, you had that nickname too? And I didn't even grow up in Cleveland. So his new job title was either a bandit or an enforcer whenever the mob needed him, and they needed him. His first truly illegal deed was a deal he cut with the manager of a restaurant he went to, where the two of them would split the money in the register, and then the manager would claim the restaurant had been robbed and that the money was gone. Not a great scheme, which is why he got caught for it and sentenced to 2 years of probation, which he obviously ignored. His talents really shine through in running a stick-up gang.
He's a stick-up kid.
He's like Omar from The Wire.
He's okay.
He starts whistling A Hunting We Will Go, and he kind of looks like Elmer Fudd. A lot more similarities to Elmer Fudd than you might think, this guy.
Bugs Bunny represented the entire law enforcement.
Yeah. Except this time, Elmer Fudd seems to win. In this stick-up gang, he had a team of 7, and with them, he'd rob cafes, gambling joints, brothers. I wrote brothers, but I meant brothels. I meant brothers.
It's where men are sold.
In total, he committed 380 robberies in Cleveland, and not even a long amount of time. But these glory days came to an end after 2 things happened. First, he was contracted to rough up some guy who owed the mob money, but the guy who was with Mickey to point out who he was to attack. The phrase they kept using was the fingering man, or like the finger man. I'm like, I don't really want to say that. So
I'd rather show you.
So the guy who was with him to point out the guy pointed out the wrong guy.
Oh, no. no.
So Mickey then went and beat this guy up. And then when he realized that he beat up the wrong guy, he went to the guy who pointed out the wrong guy and beat him up.
Don't beat up the messenger.
Who it turned out was a relative of a made man. So now Mickey's in hot water with the mob. Then
wow, this tracks totally. Wow.
Wow, I totally expected this from him. So then he robbed a cafeteria and it went to hell and ended up in a huge shootout and he got arrested. So then when he got out on bail, his name was so hot both with the Cleveland mob and the Cleveland police that he was shipped to New York City for a brief stay until things cooled down.
What an idiot. Go ahead.
Greg, need I remind you, I have a slight affinity for this guy. But while he was in New York City, the Hill mob recommended Mickey to their branch in the big league, Chicago. So off Mickey went to the Windy City where he was folded into the outfit.
How could you possibly recommend after that? Oh, I got the perfect guy.
But you know what? He's good at his job.
You're right. He's good at his job.
If you want a rabid bulldog on your side,
I guess you're right.
Just send him to Chicago. Like you can't fire these guys.
They're like Catholic priests. You can't fire them. You just have to ship them off to other cities.
They just go to a city where they don't have the internet. So Mickey got folded into the outfit, which was the network of a one Al Capone. He was still a low-level guy, but here he was given his own gambling network to run and his own armed burglary crew again, and he loved it.
I bet.
He was sometimes robbing 3 places a day. It didn't matter what it was, as long as it had a register, he would rob the place. Oh, the gift shop of the orphanage? Stick
You can buy souvenirs for orphans.
Well, I want a little porcelain doll of George.
I want a little doll of a little orphan boy. Do you want an orphan boy? Oh, God, no.
No. Ew. He said about this whole time, I lived from one heist to another. The only thing I really wanted money for was a new hat. Sometimes I would buy 2 hats in one day for $50 a piece. I was so crazy about buying hats.
Him and Lucy Ricardo both.
His husband, furious.
How much is $7?
And then his husband starts speaking in Yiddish really fast.
But Mickey.
His husband's also named Mickey. I love reading quotes from Mickey Cohen because they're always ridiculous.
Instead of saying, he just said son of a bitch. If he couldn't think of a word, son of a bitch. Way to you make a son of a bitch left on son of a bitch way.
So things were going great in Chicago. He was robbing innocent people. He was making money. He had hats.
Up to 2 hats.
More than 2, less than 4. There was apparently an incident where he murdered several other gangsters in a card game and briefly went to jail. Could not find anything about this, but I just heard that happened.
He takes Uno very seriously. When he draw 4,
Uno. Oh no.
Oh no. I drew on 4 of them.
That's what's kind of tricky about mafia research is like there's so many crazy stories that like, but why wasn't the historian around to document it? Like you just have to take some guy who went to prison 40 times words that like, yeah, Mickey Cohen did this.
It's very much like researching ghost stories.
It is because gangsters don't exist. But then he had yet another burglary go terribly wrong and his name became too hot to handle once again and he needed to get out of Chicago. But where to send him this time? Well, there is a newish city that the mob was trying to get a hold of out west, and wouldn't you know it, Mickey was from this city, kind of mostly from there.
It was La Jolla. No, go ahead, sorry.
The local La Jolla boy. So this was a perfect fit. In 1937, Mickey Cohen moved back to LA for good. They had a guy running things out there, and Mickey's new job was to help this man who they called Bugsy Siegel. As we know, Bugsy Siegel was the East Coast Jewish Mafia's man in LA, close associate of Meyer Lansky and on Lucky Luciano.
Right.
He was at this point on his rise to controlling most of the illegal activity in LA, and we all know how he died. But for now, Mickey Cohen was assigned as
Bugsy's guy.
Basically his right-hand man and enforcer, and together they took over Los Angeles.
Right.
If Bugsy wanted dirty work done, Mickey was the guy who would either arrange it or do it himself. Right. All while living in an apartment at 8th and Figueroa across the street from the Ambassador Hotel.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and not the last time RFK is going to come up in this story.
Jeez.
After what?
He lived in that book depository on 8th and Fig?
Always peeking out. He was working on some concoction he called a magic bullet. And then he said, someday that guy who I'm going to kill is going to be Trump's vice president. After what I'm sure he loves saying, putzing around for a while with a little crew he put together doing a couple holdups around LA a week. Mickey really learned a lot from Bugsy and assumed the role of a mafioso at his side. Like he learned how to be a gangster.
Yeah.
Well, not just like a thug, but like a gangster.
A gangster with a suit who has to answer the phone every once in a while.
And a third hat. He started running gambling rings, drug dealing rings, sex work rings. He met a gambler named Nick the Greek, who he'd meet regularly at the Brown Derby, who introduced Mickey to the world of horse racing. And within 3 years, he was the bookie king of the West Coast, Mickey Cohen. He was also behind a lot of crooked labor union unions and is believed to be the guy who first linked the Teamsters union to the mob.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they think that was Mickey Cohen's. That was his like Louisiana Purchase. He also had in his pocket pretty much every government worker in every city in LA County. And if you want to learn more about all the cities in LA County, go to our TikTok at LA Meekly.
He owned the guy in Gardena. He owned the guy in the...
What about the guy in Van Nuys? What about the guy in San Pedro? Now we're going to do a video. All the places Mickey Cohen had a finger in the government.
He fingered the government? What's that mean?
He basically owned every police officer in LA County. The police chief of Burbank bought a yacht with all the money he was taking from Mickey Cohen. He named it the Mickey, which everyone assumed, oh, you must be talking about Disney because they're going to move here one day, right?
Yeah,
that's the Mickey.
That's it.
Which came in handy because he was still arrested fairly often, but was always released shortly after. He was regularly beating down people in public who didn't go along with his plans and gambling, so naturally he'd be arrested, but he had so many cops, lawyers, and judges on his payroll that nothing would stick, and the few times it would, the DA would just dismiss it. He was so well connected that we have him to thank for helping get Richard Nixon elected to Congress. That's one of the things of like, oh,
okay,
it goes that far down. These connections really came in handy on May 16th, 1945, when he killed his rival, Maxie Shaman, but the DA ruled it was self-defense. Mickey later said it cost him $40,000 to escape that charge.
Wow.
It's expensive to
Oh,
defend
poor
yourself.
you had to pay $40,000 and not go to prison.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. It was self-defense. I cut his head off.
And then showed his body to his family and kids. It was all in self-defense.
Yeah,
so
I
that
sent
they
them
would,
roses.
So that they wouldn't come for him. But this incident was also the first time his name appeared in newspapers, which would become a very important part of his story later. He had rackets going all over town. His first card room was at Santa Monica and Western. He ran a full-on casino called the La Brea Social Club at La Brea and Beverly. He had a bookie shop a block away from Warner Brothers Studios. He also ran the Dinkara Stock Farm in that horsey area of Burbank at Mariposa and Riverside, right across the street from the park we recorded in during the pandemic.
Really?
The other parts of the pandemic.
Right.
Some of the more harrowing parts of the pandemic.
real part of the pandemic.
Not this fake part. I mean, COVID used to be real. Now it's fake.
Now that everyone's getting it, it's fake. But when nobody I knew was getting it, that's when it was real.
Now that I had it like a month and a half ago, I don't believe it. I wasn't sick. So this place, the Dinkara Stock Farm, was a horse ranch that if this red light was on in the driveway, you would walk down this little hill to this stable that had a casino in it.
Oh my God.
And of course, the dealer was a beautiful stallion, a Mr. Ed level disguise.
Wires in his face.
Yeah, they were constantly shoving things in his behind so that he would deal blackjack.
Hit me. Oh God. Oh God, not again.
And of course, he helped Bugsy Siegel set up the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas and got Las Vegas started. But he also had a ton of regular seeming businesses around town that, of course, were all fronts. As you remember, he owned the Cafe Trocadero on the Sunset Strip.
Right.
Also, the Continental Cafe at 7823 Santa Monica. He financed Slapsy Maxie's Cafe, which is now the New Beverly, right?
I believe it is, yeah.
Or at least next door to it. But he was behind that. He ran a club called the Rum Boogie near Hollywood and Highland. It seems he owned the Club Flamingo, which was an openly gay bar with drag shows at 1027 North La Brea. He had a party house at 9100 Hazen Drive just off Mulholland. But then he also had just regular everyday businesses that, of course, were also fronts. He had the Concrecota paint store at 8109 Beverly, which is where he killed Max Shaman.
Jesus.
It's blood. It's paint.
I mean, it was a sample. I was showing him a sample of paint.
And then he just died.
Yeah.
He just died and then a big wound showed up in his head.
It's the wound's fault.
Paint got over it.
The wound killed him.
I paid $40,000 to pin this on the wound. He famously had Michael's exclusive haberdashery, which I love saying, at 8804 Sunset, which was next door to where Book Soup now is, across from the now demolished Tower Records. Right. Or at least gutted, which is something he did to a lot of people. And all the while, Rocky and Bullwinkle watched over the whole thing.
Complicit in their silence.
The way he would have to goose Bullwinkle to get him to stay quiet about what he saw. Attached to the haberdashery was also Courtly Jewelers and a tailor, which were both owned by him. He had flower shops and gas stations. He was raking in the dough which is not a bakery he owned. He was just raking in dough. By the mid to late 40s, he was making $80,000 a month, which today would be over $1 million a month. And he was living every single penny of it. Jesus. He was a man about town, and you would see him anywhere from Kohl's, of course. They have that urinal that's like Mickey Cohen, Peter. Yeah. And I'm like, doesn't taste like it.
This doesn't taste like kidney stone.
This doesn't taste like Evander Holyfield's grandpa's ear. He was at Largo, the Formosa, the Apple Pan, Pink's. He'd be at the Slate Brothers Comedy Club getting made fun of by Don Rickles.
Walking a very tight rope, I bet.
Everything I hear about Don Rickles, like whenever they talk about like everyone loved being made fun of Don Rickles, they always have to say like even the mob liked it.
I bet they had to pay Don Rickles like, make sure you say something nice about us.
Don't bring up that his dad died of TB.
Hey, anyone's here? Dad's died of TB?
Hockey puck. He'd tip $5 to $10 to anybody who helped him do anything, which is a lot of money. Like even today, if someone gave me a $5 tip, I'm indebted to you for the rest of my life.
You want me to whack somebody? You want me to slit a throat?
Did he send him postcards every month? And his passion for fashion never left him. He was constantly buying Stetson hats and fedoras, tailor-made shoes. He would only wear a suit twice before he'd give it to his haberdashery to sell secondhand, and he'd buy a new suit. And always taking the time to beat up Nazis whenever he saw them in the streets of LA.
Good guy.
That's one of the things of like, there's so many. Look, I'm not going to argue. No. There's a lot of bad things Mickey Cohen has done, but he gave a lot of money to a lot of people who probably needed money, and he would beat up Nazis. So right there, it's like,
those are too good. He's got something going for him. He was certainly like a gangster, also like a man about town.
He was.
Who beat up Nazis. Not every man about town beats up Nazis.
No,
maybe Bruce Wayne. But.
There was one billionaire playboy who does such a thing. But yeah, he was like, it's like how we always see Andy Dick. Well, not anymore, but we would always see Andy Dick everywhere. Like, imagine if that was Mickey Cohen.
Imagine Andy Dick killed several people and we all knew about it.
Yeah, imagine.
Imagine if Andy Dick killed several people for, I don't know, Bryan Singer.
He shared all of this wealth and clout with his wife, Lavon Cohen, née Weaver, who he married in 1940. She was always described as an actress, but it seems in reality, she was a former sex worker because I kept reading that, like, she's an actress. And one person was like, yeah, she's an actress. And I tried looking her up on IMDb and there's nothing. But then as we know...
A bunch of guys' names. What does that mean?
All these movies about doing cities. I don't remember these do cities stories. But then as we know from my Beverly Hills Bermuda Triangle segment, things changed in a big way on June 20th, 1947. Bugsy Siegel was mysteriously killed in his girlfriend's house in Beverly Hills in the Bermuda Triangle. Once again, the wound. This wound.
Someone's gonna arrest this wound.
And now Mickey Cohen's boss/mentor was gone, and surprise, he was furious. Yeah. When he found out what happened, he went straight to the hotel where he believed the killer to be hiding, shot a gun into the ceiling, screaming for him to meet him outside, but he had to leave before the cops showed up. He also lashed out with violence at other rival mobs, which put him on a lot of people's kill lists after this. Yeah. Whether or not this was all just performative rage and he himself was actually behind Bugsy's murder, we are never really going to know. But what this did mean was that with his old boss gone, Mickey Cohen was now the king of the LA underworld at age 34.
I can't imagine a 30-year-old running things. Jack Dragnet makes more sense. He was like, what, like 60s?
900 years old.
900.
Well, he was a vampire. Yeah. Having success in your early to mid 30s, who has that?
What is this, the 90s?
One of his first orders of business was being approached by representatives of some of the other East Coast syndicates who told them their organizations would offer him, here's some more air quotes you can't see, protection in return for most of his profits in Los Angeles. He obviously refused them, which led to the so-called Sunset Wars over control of the LA rackets, which you and I couldn't find too many specifics about that. We just like we just have to take the mafia's word of like, yeah, there was the Sunset Wars.
Yeah, I bet there's a whole book dedicated to it, but on the internet and everyone's articles, it's sort of like, well, a lot of people shot at Mickey Cohen and they didn't kill him. Makes him the Fidel Castro of the LA mob.
At mobhistory.org, they had nothing.
And that's a dark web. They have everything.
Mobhistory. We don't exist. There were violent mob turf skirmishes fairly regularly in LA around this time, not only between Mickey and the East Coast guys, but also amongst his local rivals. Mm-hmm. It's suspected that Mickey was the guy who on February 9th, 1948 at 6:45 p.m. had a couple guys drive to 312 South Elm Drive in Beverly Hills with a box in their hand. They rang the doorbell, and who should open it but our old friend Tony the Hat Cornero. One of the guys said, "Here, Tony, it's a package for you," and then shot him 5 times.
Yes, they certainly did, didn't they?
Oh, my Uber Eats.
Oh, Thai food, thank God.
I love the banana pudding from Magnolia. Oh, yowza. And that's what Tony Cornero sounded like. Cornero survived this, but Mickey's intention of consolidating his local power worked because Cornero soon left LA for good. But his main nemeses were the Dragnas. Yep. Jack Dragna, the Holy Trinity, the man who is 3.
And probably his brother, too.
Yeah, both of them. They kind of worked together. He was jealous that Mickey was now the top dog in LA, so he decided to try to take Mickey out of the picture. One of the major attempts happened in 1948 at his beloved haberdashery. Do you know about this story?
No, I don't think I do.
So Mickey was in there doing some business when 3 gunmen walked in, including Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano, who was a known Dragna man.
Oh boy.
And they opened fire. Lucky for Mickey Cohen, he was an extreme germaphobe and had serious OCD, so he used to wash his hand 50 times a day. And at the moment these gunmen walked into the haberdashery, he was in the bathroom washing his hands. And when he heard the bullets, he climbed onto the sink to wait it out. And when he came out, one of his bodyguards, Hookie Rothman, had his head blown off and the gunmen were gone. God. So his life was saved because he was washing his hands. And when I told Melissa about like Mickey Cohen did this and this, and you wouldn't believe it, he would wash his hand 50 times a day. And she's like, oh, maybe it's like a Lady Macbeth thing. And he's
right.
Like, that's a really...
That's pretty on the point.
So after this, the haberdashery was outfitted with bulletproof steel doors and 24-hour security, and Mickey got himself a bulletproof Cadillac.
All welcome. All are welcome. And I don't remember where I heard this. I'm pretty sure I heard it.
Or if I heard this,
or I dreamt it. I'm pretty sure I heard a story somewhere that at one of the nightclubs on Sunset, an actress, I don't know if it was Jane Mansfield or not, got in a car and left and realized it wasn't their car.
Yeah.
And came back. The valet was like, and there's like, that gave away Mickey Cohen's car.
I have a story similar to that actually in our listener question thing, which ties into it. But my story ends a little differently.
Okay.
But maybe this has happened multiple times to him. Oh, I thought it was my bulletproof Cadillac.
No, that's not my Tommy gun. My Tommy gun's got a different handle on it.
But he could still be shot at when he wasn't in the haberdashery or in his car, which is what happened on July 20th, 1949, outside of Sherry's restaurant.
The big one.
At 9039 Sunset Boulevard.
At like 3:30 in the morning. When I read that, I'm like, oh my God, what's he doing up?
This isn't even the big one.
Oh, that's not the big one.
I mean, this is a big incident, but like worse things happened to him that we're going to get to. Mickey and a few of his guards and friends walked out of the restaurant and were shot at from across Sunset Boulevard.
Which is a big street.
A very big street.
Yeah.
One of them were
5 lanes.
One of them were killed and 4 of them were shot, including Mickey himself. He got shot in the shoulder. He was rushed to the Queen of Angels Hospital and got huge flower arrangements sent to him every day. Some people suspected that the ones shooting were off-duty LAPD officers, but it's likely it was an ordered hit again by the Dragnas.
Possibly.
Okay.
It makes it honestly makes the most sense.
Yeah, we're not. Look, Greg, this isn't the Senate hearing committee. You can admit. You tell me. I know you got the inside scoop on the Dragnas.
Come on, just put your hand on the Bible and just tell me what happened.
We're not under oath here. Just touch the Bible when you speak to me.
A lot of websites I went to were sort of like, did he do it or did he not? We'll never know. I'm like, it makes the most sense.
Yeah,
like he hated him. Bugsy was not here to stop him.
The Dragnas would never do that.
But then also like just knowing the cops, like I think he had sheriff's deputies on his side, but I think LAPD was trying to kill him. Something like that.
The official stance of the LAPD, yes, they are against Mickey Cohen, but like, have you seen the LAPD?
I hate making money. Let's kill Mickey Cohen. I hate making money.
I have too much money. We can just take the money from social services. So his attorney, Sam Rummel, was even killed in Laurel Canyon in 1950, which was the same guy we talked about in the Gardena episode, the lawyer who he got shot in the neck with a shotgun. Right. That was Mickey Cohen's lawyer.
Jeez.
So clearly trying to get him out in the wild wasn't working. So why not try getting him where he laid his violent little head at night? Mickey lived in Beverly Hills for a while, but he was a known entity. So anyone who came or went from his house was constantly being stopped by the Beverly Hills cops. Eddie Murphy, every single time. So he decided to have a new house built for him in Brentwood at 513 Moreno Avenue near the Brentwood Country Mart. They described it as a mansion, but it looked quite modest in my opinion. But the pièce de résistance was that since Mickey never drank or smoked or did drugs, he had his own personal soda fountain in his house.
Oh my God. The things you can relate to him to are stacking up.
It runs in the family, Greg.
Germaphobe hates Nazis, has a something done in his own home? What's the problem?
5'5", vicious boxer, trading newspapers for hot dogs at a very young age. So it wasn't entirely a safe haven because even during its construction, the LAPD got wise to it and had a bug planted in it while it was being built, but they found it pretty quickly.
Hey, bugs were legal back then.
But they found it quickly because the gardener accidentally cut the wire. And they're like, what the hell is this? There's a bug in the garden. Yeah, so?
Yeah.
Well, Mickey.
Then
The Dragnas tried a bug of their own in the form of a bomb that they placed under the house, but the fuse failed and a guard saw the wire. But both these groups were more successful on their second attempts. The Dragnas tried once again. This is the big one. Allegedly the Dragnas, but from the Mickey perspective, this was the Dragnas.
I believe you. I'm laughing that he's the Fidel Castro of LA crime. So many attempts to kill him, and they're all like, the gardener cut the wire. The fuse didn't go off from the bomb. Like, it's all like, well, Acme brand bomb?
Did I tell you about his road trip through Peru? Was that Fidel Castro or Che Guevara?
I don't know.
Or both of them?
Possibly.
Or was that
both
Tu Mob Tambien?
There was a woman with them.
Jack Dragna and Mickey Cohen went on a motorcycle trip with an older woman through Peru. E2 Mafia Tambien. The Dragnas tried once again to bomb his house on February 6, 1950, and this time it worked. They used 2 fuses this time, and this bomb blew up its 30 sticks of dynamite that were allegedly packed personally by Jack Dragna, just like it promised to do. It blew up. It blew up not only his bedroom, but all his neighbors' windows shattered, and it was heard 10 miles away. This explosion.
What did the LAPD do this? This is a nod to them blowing up that neighborhood. Anyways.
What was it, the 4th of July? Leading up to the 4th of July in East LA? It was a crater 20 feet wide. It left a crater 20 feet wide and 6 feet deep. The problem was the bomb was placed right under his reinforced safe. So the blast was mostly directed down. So while it destroyed his bedroom, it only destroyed his bedroom. He was actually in his wife's bedroom at the time.
Scandalous.
What was going? I know. Why don't we push the bedrooms together tonight?
Our twin bedrooms.
So he was not. No one got hurt.
Jesus Christ.
Except for Jack Dragna's reputation.
His reputation as a great bomb maker. Next, he drew a tunnel on the side of a highway. Try to see
This'll work.
It has to work.
He cut out a hole in the sand. So after this, he had searchlights installed on his roof and put in an armored door and 24-hour security around his home. His neighbors tried to have the city council evict him from living in Brentwood. Meanwhile, with his house blown open, the LAPD gangster squad took the opportunity to place a new wireless bug inside of his house. Like, it's open.
Like they came dressed as like carpenters and masons.
They came dressed as smoke and they were like, They had a guy cover his clothes in ammonia to ward off his dog and slip in. If the dog bites you, the dog will faint. And slip into the wreckage one night and put the bug in his closet. One of Mickey's disgruntled neighbors allowed the gangster squad to use his garage as a monitoring base next door. The problem with...
May I?
Yeah.
The balls on that neighbor.
Hey.
Your neighbor's Mickey Cohen and you're like inviting the cops in? Like,
as somebody who's had a bad neighbor, I get it. If it was Mickey Cohen, I might think twice, though. The problem with this wireless bug was that it messed up his TV reception. But when Mickey called a TV repair person to come see what was happening, the gangster squad intercepted this guy and enlisted him to plant a new bug inside the TV itself. In all, Mickey had 11 assassination attempts on his life, but nothing stopped him. And most importantly, the press loved him.
Yeah.
All of this murder and attempted murder, I have got to take this guy to lunch. He became a local celebrity. He was being written about in the legitimate and tabloid papers all around LA. Hedda Hopper wrote about him. A local paper called him public nuisance #1. Life magazine called him an exhibitionist hoodlum, which sounds kinky. Rave reviews from Mickey Cohen. Yeah. People would come up to him for autographs. Could you imagine? Imagine going up to Mickey Cohen
Cohen.
Ooh.
So I approached...
Clark Gable. Oh, Mickey Cohen. Bloodthirsty gangster? Everything he touches turns to murder? Can I have your autograph?
So I approached his bulletproof Cadillac like anyone else would.
And I tapped him on the shoulder from behind.
I slowly moved past all his guards, all wearing brass knuckles. And I did a joke. I'm like, I'm the cops.
His guards picked me up by the collar so gently to show him if he knew me. So he was a genuine celebrity about town and he loved it. Yeah. He loved the attention and he loved talking to the press and creating creating even more controversy. He told a newspaper that he was actually reducing crime in the city. He said, all the types of people who would under previous conditions be busting people's heads in dark alleys and breaking into respectable homes for robbery are now on my payroll and don't have to do that sort of thing to make a living. I've been a boon to this town, and I'll tell you something, despite the attitude of the police, there are a lot of people beginning to realize that fact. Another endearing thing about him is he was so anti-LAPD.
Yeah, you got to give it to him for that. Knowing his enemy was Parker, Chief Parker.
Yeah.
We did an episode about what made Parker bad. You're like, kind of Mickey's.
I'll take the worst of two evils. The only thing he was ashamed of was his uncouth bearing. So he hired a tutor to teach him how to read and also how to be polite. And he used this to ingratiate himself into the Hollywood elite. Like, he turned himself into a charming man.
I would be so terrified to be Mickey Cohen's teacher. No, Mickey, you got it wrong again. I'm so sorry. And knuckles breaking.
You're using the salad fork on your veal, Mickey.
You conjugated the verb wrong. Everyone does it. You know what? They changed it this week. They changed it. So you got it right.
Any fork you want to use with the fork like in his eye. Which one of these is the eyeball fork? He was friends with everyone in the Rat Pack. No surprise.
No surprise.
He saved Robert Mitchum's career by getting him out of a marijuana possession charge, and he quickly took advantage of Hollywood as well. So he funded a new tabloid called Hollywood Nightlife that was sent to all the top movie executives in town that would dish dirt on celebrities that his henchmen would dig up.
Oh, wow.
What would happen, his people, Mickey's people, would go to these celebrities and tell them either they pay to advertise in his magazine or he'd publish all their secrets in it and ruin their careers. So he did this to Frank Sinatra. He did this to Judy Garland, who actually knew Mickey and would go to him asking for help with the people trying to blackmail her, not realizing she was asking for help from the guy who was blackmailing her.
I'll think about it, Judy.
Go ask the other Mickey you know. He said, like, I felt a little bad about that later in life. Like, yeah, this little girl who was being abused by everybody was asking you for help and you were abusing her. Oh, you felt bad about that? Great guy. So there was a sex tape of Lana Turner and his bodyguard / her boyfriend, Johnny Stampinato, that he was circulating, Mickey Cohen, which turned into a whole ordeal when Stampinato turned up dead in Lana Turner's home.
Oh, it must have been a gang hit.
Lana and the police claimed that her 13-year-old daughter stabbed him to death for allegedly abusing her mom, which Mickey was furious about because he didn't want his friend's name to be smeared. So in retaliation, he leaked a bunch of love letters between Turner and Stampinato to Aggie Underwood to prove that she actually loved him. And also, I think he suspected it was actually Lana Turner who killed him. It was a messy situation.
Yeah. No, that was messy.
Best relationship I've ever been in. But all this glory and Lana Turner smearing hit a major speed bump in 1950 with the United States Senate Special Committee to investigate crime in interstate commerce in Washington, D.C., aka the Kefauver Committee. In Washington, D.C. This was a huge nationwide crackdown on organized crime and was kind of portrayed in The Godfather 2. Right. This committee looked into Mickey Cohen and busted him on the only way you can get a mobster in trouble: tax evasion.
Jeez.
Mickey denied it, saying tax evasion was the only crime in my whole life of which I can say I am absolutely innocent. Regardless, he got sentenced to 4 years in prison in June 1951. He had to sell off all his belongings to pay off his debt and ran big ads for his haberdashery that you could come there to buy Mickey Cohen's clothes, which I'd be there. That's like that day's Alex Trebek's estate sale.
Oh, there's all this red paint on this shirt.
There's all these 5'5" stocky men outside of the haberdashery. Yeah, this must be the paint from the paint store. He even sold off the book and movie rights to his life to pay for this. LaVaughn was also indicted in this, but her charges were dropped and Mickey ended up spending 3.5 years at McNeil Island Penitentiary in Washington. He said in there with him, this story has no place anywhere, but it's so weird. I had to tell it. And I'm going to change the word he used, but he said that there was an Inuit in prison with him. He said there was one fella, an Inuit, who was doing time for eating up his wife. Since when is that a federal offense? I asked the warden. The way it actually happened was the couple was stranded on an ice cake and the husband got so hungry he killed her and consumed her. I talked to this Inuit. He had no feeling on the subject. That story has no place in history, but I'm fascinated by it.
He's a Donner Party apologist?
What's the crime? Show me the crime.
Yeah. Louis Keysburg ate all those kids up? What's the big deal? They didn't have jobs.
So what? In this country, you can lock people up for having a nice meal?
Is she complaining? No.
What's her side of the story?
Finally, she made him a good dinner. Am I right?
Beats her meatloaf.
Oh, Mickey Cohen's weird.
He's a very weird guy. So now it's 1955. And 1955?
Somebody washes his hands 50 times a day
And
is
is
okay
like,
with
yeah,
like, hey, he ate his wife.
Did you cook her properly? So now it's 1955 and Mickey Cohen's out of jail. Marty McFly comes to town and
He's got a weird vest on.
Mickey Cohen finds this sports almanac. That's how Mickey Cohen
That's how he gets his money back, yeah.
He opened up a casino.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fits. So Mickey Cohen's out of jail, 1955, and back on the streets. He moved into an apartment at 10599 Wilshire, but as he put it, he was a changed man.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of work with charity. He gave talks to kids to stay in school and out of trouble. He even flew to New York City to go to a revival show at Madison Square Garden by his old friend Billy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a religious man. The newspapers floated out the idea.
Ties to Billy Graham.
Yeah, surprise. the newspapers floated out the idea that Mickey Cohen was going to convert and become a born-again Christian and his crimes were over. And then his probation ended. Mickey Cohen was back at it. He was free to be the mob boss of Los Angeles again. He was like, I'm never going to convert. he said that Billy Graham paid him $10,000 to be in the audience at that show as a publicity stunt.
Wow.
Mickey Cohen didn't care about...
He loved being Jewish. He loved it. He loved every part of it.
What? His biggest crime was being Jewish? So he was back running all his old rackets in no time and was back in the public eye as a media darling.
Yeah.
He was very vocal now about prison reform, which I thought, wow, that's great. But then it turned out his main issue was about how much gay sex there was in prison and that it shouldn't be tolerated.
There should be a prison just for that. I'm not against it, but you shouldn't be mixing it in.
In the straight men's prison, there should also be women. Yeah, I was like, wow, good for you, Mickey Cohen. And then I digged a little deeper. I was like,
The prison industrial complex is a problem because sometimes I just want to take a shower. I'm not trying to flirt. I'm dirty.
I got to take 50 showers a day.
This isn't me trying to come on to people. I have a problem.
So he was also still, of course, very anti-LAPD, which was great to listen to. He was being watched pretty much every step he took when he got back to LA. And they would take him aside and give him a ticket for any little thing. Like if he jaywalks, he's getting a ticket. You threw your milkshake container on the floor, you're getting a ticket.
That was actually recycling. You meant to throw it in the recycling one. I got to give you a ticket.
We're taking you downtown to the DA you own. He told the newspapers that the LAPD was so focused on him that they were letting all the other criminals get away. Okay. The high point of these opinions happened in 1957 when he was on a TV interview with Mike Wallace, where he admitted on TV to killing upwards of one person in self-defense and then went on a tirade against LAPD Chief William Parker, calling him a known alcoholic and a sadistic degenerate.
I love the phrase known alcoholic. Everyone knows about it.
Why are we trying to hide it?
I love a gangster who doesn't drink is like, this known alcoholic over here.
Pervert and derelict.
Deviant.
It's just like every single situation of Mickey Cohen is like an explosive situation. And that's why he was so much fun to me.
He's literally like a Joe Pesci in any gangster movie type. Like
he's like the worst Joe Pesci role. Same size. He eventually moved back into Brentwood at 705 South Barrington Avenue into another place that he had a personal ice cream fountain and actually opened up an ice cream shop near there at 11719 San Vicente filled with all his favorite ice creams and his favorite candy, Toblerone.
Whoa.
It was, of course, a front, but probably his favorite front. I read one story. I forget
it was a front for cookies. Go ahead.
We make cookies in the back. Well, what does that mean? And I take him back there. It's just like, it's just snickerdoodles everywhere. There was one story. I forget who it was. It was some actress of the time who she was like, I went to this ice cream shop with my daughter and Mickey Cohen was sitting in the corner and I walked in and he yelled rum raisin and I left.
There's a sale on rum raisin.
I gotta get out of here. But not in front of my daughter. In 1958, Lavon divorced him for being emotionally abusive.
Okay.
He then started dating around with burlesque queens with names like Tempest Storm, Beverly Hills, and Candy Bar, two R's, aka Juanita Dale Slusher, which is just as good of a stage name. Yeah. Those two, him and Candy Bar, were a big tabloid couple, and you'll be interested to hear a weird conspiracy involving her in a little bit.
Okay.
Cue the JFK impression. Warm it up. Red leather, yellow leather, toot the tin trumpet, Tommy in time. Around this time, he also downsized his life and rented a house in, wouldn't you believe it, Van Nuys.
Wow.
At 13841.
That's slumming it.
138, how dare you? Sherman Oaks North, Greg. 13841 Wyandotte to save some money. The house is still there. It's very weird. This was also around the time of my favorite part of this story for many reasons. December 2nd, 1959 at 11:30 p.m. Mickey Cohen was at a big celebrity hotspot Italian restaurant called Rondelli's at 13359 Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks, which is now Wood and Water, right next to the Menchie's, very near to where someone on this podcast lives. It was a restaurant right there. It was like Liberace went there, like all of the Valley people, celebrities went, which was all of them. So that's one part of the story I like. The second part is that Mickey would always bring his bulldog, Mickey Jr. there, put him in his lap and tie a napkin around his neck and feed him a plate of linguine.
Oh my God.
That's my second favorite part of this story. But
as a dog owner who has to take him to restaurants, that's not that weird.
My dog is more of a Capellini dog, but I can see why you find that funny.
He likes the rosé fine, but he's kind of a Chardonnay fellow. Go ahead.
Rover-zay. But on the night in question, Mickey was eating there when a rival bookie came in furious about something Mickey had done. He came in, he dragged Mickey's friend, who was an entertainer, but they wouldn't say who. He dragged this guy out of a phone booth and started beating him. It was Milton Berle. He had to keep pulling.
He dragged for a very long time.
When does it? It's like what is this, one of those clown phone booths?
I grabbed him by the wrong part.
This phone cable is so...
Oh no.
Then this guy went up to Mickey's table to berate Mickey. And while he was yelling, someone at the table, most likely Mickey, shot this guy between the eyes from a gun he had under the table. The entire restaurant cleared out. When the cops got there, there was just a body on the floor. A little bit later, Mickey showed up holding his bulldog and said to the cops, my third favorite thing in this story, what happened? I was in the bathroom washing my hands.
The bullet has his signature on it. What happened? I was compulsively acting. What was going on?
This bullet looks like it has dog linguine all over it. The dog's like wiping his mouth.
No, that's pasta. It's a different kind of pasta.
Yeah, that's not linguine. That's tortellini. Classic Valley story.
Classic Valley story. So casually arrogant.
The confidence of this man to be like, what's this dead body doing here? I was in the bathroom, for the last 2 hours.
Anyways, I got to pay my tab. I mean, someone's tab.
Yeah, he's just throwing $100 bills at the cops. So this restaurant never reopened after this.
No.
But then came the second and biggest speed bump in the Mickey Cohen story.
They get rum raisin back.
Rum raisin! Robert F. Kennedy, the rum raisin of the Kennedy family.
How dare you? He's the mint chocolate chip of the Kennedy family.
He's not quite chocolate malted crunch, but he'll do. As the U.S. Attorney General, RFK was hell-bent on taking down organized crime in this country. So yet again, Mickey Cohen was in the crosshairs. Also being investigated in this campaign were New Orleans mob boss, this is the guy, Carlos Marcello, and Jimmy Hoffa. This time, Mickey Cohen got nailed yet again for the only thing you can get a mobster for, tax evasion, for a second time.
Dude, you gotta just pay them. You have the money.
Just pay some of your taxes.
Yeah, you have the money. It's fine.
He was convicted of 13 counts of tax evasion and owed $160,000 in back taxes, which today is over $1.5 million. He had a great lineup of witnesses called to testify against him, including Robert Mitchum, Jerry Lewis, and Red Skelton. I would love to see that show.
Testify against him?
Not like they didn't turn it. Like they for some reason they were involved and they had to be like, I guess I saw Mickey take all this cash.
I thought it was just like Monopoly money.
I thought he was just feeding his dog.
Yeah, I thought it was lettuce. I thought it was wads of lettuce. Wasn't Abraham Lincoln on all the lettuce?
So he broke Al Capone's record and was sentenced on July 1st, 1961 to 15 years in prison and was sent to Alcatraz on July 28th.
You're kidding.
The weird conspiracy sidebar here is that his girlfriend, Candy Barr, used to date Jack Ruby back in Chicago, and hours after Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald, Candy Barr was brought in for questioning, and Mickey Cohen's lawyer, Melvin Belly, ended up defending Jack Ruby.
Wow.
Make of that what you will. I have no idea. Back to The Rock. Mickey Cohen is now a resident of Alcatraz, where he worked in the clothing room and reportedly kept a very neat cell, but was a hoarder as well. He went to temple services. He read a lot, which was something he could do now. Yeah. And most pointedly, he always followed the rules. However, after only 82 days on October 17th, he became the only prisoner of Alcatraz ever to be bailed out.
Wow.
He got bailed out of Alcatraz. His bond was signed by a member of the ever-infallible Supreme Court, Earl Warren, bailed him out of...
Whoa, Earl Warren, who attacked all the gambling ships? Earl Warren, by the way, who wrote the Warren Report on the JFK's assassination.
I don't know what to make of any of this, but that's what happened. Weird. Very weird.
No wonder people think literally everybody killed JFK, because weird stuff like that keeps popping up, and people are like, what the hell does that mean?
Candy bar?
Yeah. Candy bar was seen at exactly 2:45, getting a book from the book depository in the young adult section.
There had to have been a second dog eating linguine. But wait a minute. Lee Harvey Oswald was washing his hands at the time.
I might have shot the cop in Dallas on the street, but I was washing my hands at the time of the JFK assassination.
He was then sent back to Alcatraz on May 14th, 1962, and then transferred the remainder of his sentence to a federal prison in Atlanta. Atlanta. Oh, I'm turning into my mom. Atlanta.
Sit up straight.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess his bail didn't take, or they were like, what is this? No, you're back in jail.
Earl Warren's not a real guy.
Who? This was where his life took a permanent turn for the worse. On August 14th, 1963, in jail in Atlanta, Mickey was being taught radio and TV repair, maybe to make sure he couldn't get bugged by the gangster squad again, when some random prisoner from another part of the compound not jumped. He's not, what's that guy? Not Jack the Ripper, but the other guy.
Oh, Spring Hill Jack?
Spring Hill Jack. They finally nailed him, and he's in prison in Atlanta.
But they let him keep all the stuff.
They thought he could only jump over 11-foot walls.
He can only jump in England. Guys, we're in San Francisco.
The conversion rate is different.
I can't jump as high here.
So this guy climbed, not jumped, a 12-foot wall to get to where Mickey was, picked up a lead pipe, and beat legendary mob boss Mickey Cohen into a coma.
Oh my God.
They had to give him brain surgery to save his life, and he stayed in a coma for 2 weeks before waking up alive, but he was now permanently paralyzed partially and needed a cane to walk for the rest of his life.
Jeez.
Mickey had no idea who this guy was. He said it was some lunatic. Never knew him, never saw him. Can you imagine them putting some lunatic in there with normal people?
Not wrong.
He sued the U.S. government for $10 million for allowing this to happen, and he won.
Wow.
But he only got $100,000, which the IRS immediately took to pay off part of his back taxes.
Fair.
He ended up only serving 11 years of his sentence and was released from jail in 1972. He moved to 1014 Westgate in Brentwood, and Frank Sinatra gave him $25,000 to get him back on his feet.
Different expression for somebody who has to walk with a cane.
Get him back on his cane.
Yeah.
He basically just went on a press tour for the rest of his life. He was giving interviews in newspapers. He was interviewed on TV. He was on Merv Griffin. He published an autobiography called Mickey Cohen, In My Own Words, in 1975, the profits of which the IRS took. He had been friends with William Randolph Hearst, of course.
Who wasn't?
So when the whole Patty Hearst thing happened, Mickey offered to the Hearst family to track her down using his contacts, and he actually found her in Cleveland and offered to get her back, but he warned them it was going to be violent. So the Hearst said no, and that ended
William
great.
Randolph Hearst said no.
Randolph Hearst was long dead, but whoever his son was like, no, that's not what our family's about anymore.
Oh, by the way, I just wanted to jump in earlier, but not to slow you down, but the IRS wrote the foreword for his book. Go ahead. Did you know that? The IRS wrote the foreword?
We deserve this book. Mickey Cohen, thank you so much. And this was just kind of his life now. He wasn't quite the same either physically or mentally after what happened in prison, and his days of being a mob boss were over. He was the mob equivalent of like a Hollywood Squares contestant.
Oh, yeah.
And might have been on Hollywood Squares. I don't know. But he always stuck to his motto of anything to make a buck, and always maintained, I didn't kill anyone that didn't deserve killing in the first place. And he's kind of right. Like, that's one of the things of where I'm like, he's not that bad of a guy. But then I think about like, he was human trafficking. Right. He was drugs and gambling money, ruined so many people's lives. Like vulnerable people's lives.
Right. I hurt people in the long run, like in the roundabout way, but I never directly killed anybody.
I never hit a woman, but my associates did. In the mid-70s, he started having stomach problems and was diagnosed with an ulcer that turned out to actually be stomach cancer, which is the only other way than tax fraud to get a mob boss. Mickey Cohen died on July 29, 1976 at the UCLA hospital at age 62. He's buried at the Hillside Memorial Park Cemetery, which is the one you see off the 405 near the Fox Hills Mall. Oh, right. So go grab yourself a Randy's donut and sprinkle a few sprinkles on the grave of a man who doesn't really deserve much respect, but would probably love the sprinkles.
Make sure to keep his gravestone very clean. He would have liked that very much.
It gets washed 50 times a day.